Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode in True Japanese Ghost Stories, a series where I cover scary Japanese urban legends and ghost encounters from the internet. This episode is about Hasshakusama, the 8-foot woman. The following story was uploaded to a Japanese forum by an anonymous user in 2008 and is supposedly referring to the giant woman yokai, which is really said to exist in Japan's Shimane prefecture. When I was young, I would often visit my grandparents on my father's side's home, which was deep in the countryside some 2 hours away from our house. They were farmers, and I loved the relaxed lifestyle they lived. So even after I'd entered high school and got my motorbike license, I'd head over there by myself during summer or winter break. Every time I'd go, my grandparents would be waiting with a wide grin on their faces, saying, "Good on you for coming so far." The last time I ever visited was sometime before I'd entered 12th grade, so it's been over a decade since I last went. It's not like I didn't bother to go after the last time. I could never go again. I had just entered spring break and decided to hop on my bike and visit my grandparents. It was still quite cold, but the weather was beautiful, without a single cloud in the sky. I arrived at their grand country home and soon made myself to the lounging area facing the garden. I became overwhelmed with a great sense of fatigue as I basked in the warm midday sun, staring at the old willow swaying in the breeze, and soon found myself drifting off to sleep. Suddenly, I was awoken by a strange noise coming from outside. It was very faint, but I could hear coo 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 in the distance, kind of like a pigeon, but more like something from a human's voice. It had an element of buzzing to it too, and it certainly wasn't a sound I'd ever heard before. I raised my head to look up at where it might be coming from, and I could see a straw hat poking out from the hedge wall. Looking closely, I could see the hat moving ever so slowly to the right. When it passed the end of the hedge, I could see a woman. Obviously, the hat belonged to her. She was wearing a white one-piece dress and slightly hobbled as she walked by. The thing is, the hedge had a height of about 2 meters. How tall was this woman to be able to stick her head over it? The woman continued to walk on until I could no longer see her or her hat. And before I knew it, the coos I could hear had also disappeared. After that, I figured the already tall woman must have been wearing super thick soled boots or something, or that a man was cross-dressing and wearing high heels. Not long after, I was sitting in the living room drinking tea, so I decided to bring up what I'd seen to my grandparents. I saw this huge woman just then. I wonder if it was a cross-dressing man. They both said, "Wow, really?" and left it at that. Then I mentioned how she was taller than the hedge, wearing a hat and making strange noises. My grandparents froze in their tracks. Suddenly, my grandfather shot out a barrage of questions. "Where'd you see it? When did you see it? How much taller was it than the hedge?" He looked angry and trembled as his aging eyes popped with vigor. I was taken aback by my grandfather's sudden energy, but I answered his questions, which calmed him down for a moment, before he quickly shuffled off to the corridor to where the landline phone was. He was calling somebody, but the door was shut, so I could hardly make out what he was saying. Not that I cared much to know. My grandmother sat in the corner, silent, trembling. Grandfather came back from his phone call and said, "You should stay here tonight. In fact, there's no way I can let you go home today." My confusion only grew as I wondered what I had done to warrant this reaction. Even with that strange encounter with the woman, it's not like I had gone up to look at and disturb her. She had come to see me. "Look after the house and be careful. I'm going to see Kay," Grandfather said to my despondent grandmother, and then he got into his truck and sped off into the afternoon glow. Terrified, I asked my grandmother what this was all about, not knowing if she'd respond. You've been noticed by Hasshakusama. You needn't worry about a thing. Your grandfather will fix things up," she said, trembling with fear. We then made small talk as we anxiously waited for my grandfather to come home. Twilight approached the village, and the only sound that could be heard was the soft whir of the decades-old ceiling lights. I later found out that Hasshakusama was a troublesome entity which had plagued this region for decades. It appears as a large woman, and like the name suggests, it has a height of 8 feet and can make cooing noises or bubbling noises which sound like a man laughing. For some, it may appear as a young woman wearing a traditional funeral dress, an elderly woman wearing a kimono, or a middle-aged woman dressed as a farmer. In any case, they all exhibit those strange sounds and are all exceptionally tall. There's a rumor that Hasshakusama was a spirit which possessed itself the body of a young traveler many years ago, but no one knows for sure. This hamlet has been sealed off by a jizo for centuries, and thus the Hasshakusama has never been spotted elsewhere. If you gain Hasshakusama's attention, it's said you'll die in a few days. When I had this experience, there hadn't been a death attributed to the ghost in some 15 years. I recently found out that when jizo seal off places, it prevents ghosts like Hasshakusama from knowing how to travel out of their locations. In fact, 4 old jizo statues exist in the village, on its eastern and western borders. I wondered why the village would be okay with trapping such a scary thing in their community. It seems they had some agreement with neighboring villages, that they would receive priority in other areas, like access to water, if they agreed to keep Hasshakusama contained. It only appears about once every dozen years, so the villagers have been relatively happy with their advantages in other necessities. When I first heard all of this, I couldn't believe any of it. I mean, it's pretty unnatural, right? Eventually, my grandfather came back. He slammed the door shut and was out of breath. An older woman was accompanying him. This is more serious than I thought. Hold this quickly. The woman, who was the Mrs. K, my grandfather had mentioned, nudged me, handing me a wooden shrine amulet. The letters were faded and hard to make out. Mrs. K then went upstairs with my grandfather, where they busily began doing something to the room. My grandmother stayed with me on the first floor, but constantly kept her eyes on me. Even when I went to the toilet, she wouldn't let me close the door. It was at this moment I finally realized I must have seriously messed up. Whatever it was I'd done. Eventually, I was forced upstairs and into the guest room. All the windows had been meticulously covered with newspaper, above which countless shrine amulets had been stuck. In each of the 4 corners lay a bowl filled with a pyramid of salt. There was also some kind of old wooden platform, above which sat a small statue of Buddha. The wood appeared to be rotting and gave off an odd smell. 2 bedpans had also been prepared in the room. My heart sank as I tried to figure out what all of this meant. My grandfather looked at me with concern and said, "Night will come soon. Listen to me. You must not exit this room before sunrise tomorrow. Your grandmother and I won't talk to you, and we won't call you. Don't leave this room before 7 o'clock. At 7, you must leave. Don't worry, I'll tell your parents about this." All I could do was nod and stay silent. You have to obey what I've just told you. Do not let go of that amulet. If something happens, tell Buddha. My hands were slick with sweat. I'd been told I was allowed to watch TV, so I turned it on. But I couldn't focus on what I was watching, no matter what channel it was. I had the onigiri and snacks my grandmother had given me before I was locked in, but I couldn't bring myself to eat. I ended up covering myself in blankets and trembling in my futon. Even though I was anxious, I must have eventually fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes, some late-night program was playing on TV. Looking at the clock, it was past 1 in the morning. Why did I have to wake up at this time? I thought to myself when I heard something knocking on the window. It sounded like someone lightly tapping it with their hand. I couldn't tell whether it was the wind or if someone was actually knocking, but I forced myself to believe it was the wind. Trying to calm myself down, I drank some tea and turned the TV volume up as high as it would go, focusing on it as hard as I could. Suddenly, I heard a voice. "Hey there, you okay? Don't be so scared." It was my grandfather's voice. I walked toward the door. Before I remembered what my grandfather had told me, I heard it again. "What's wrong? Come over here." It was almost identical to my grandfather's voice, but ever so slightly different. It wasn't his voice. I don't know why, but I realized it instantly, and when I did, goosebumps rushed through my body. Looking over at the mound of salt in the corner, I saw that its tip had completely burned and turned black. I rushed in front of the Buddha statue, clutched the amulet with all my strength, and prayed for any help I could get. Then, from outside, I heard, "Ku, ku, ku." I could hear those strange calls again, and at the same time, the windows were once again being tapped by something. I knew it wasn't tall enough to knock on the window, but all I could imagine was that woman, extending her long, pale arm, trying to break the glass. All I could do now was pray. It felt like the longest night of my life, but sunrise eventually came, and the TV began playing the morning news. In the corner of the screen, the time read 7:03 a.m. The tapping on the glass had stopped. I must have fallen asleep, or simply passed out, because the pyramids of salt had completely turned black. I checked the clock, and sure enough, it was 7. I mustered up all my courage and slowly opened the door. I was greeted by my grandparents, both of whom had very concerned looks on their faces. They began to cry, saying, "Thank God, thank God." When I went downstairs, my father was waiting. My grandfather said, "Hurry, get in the car," and stood in the garden next to a black van. Inside were a number of men, and I could hear them busily talking amongst themselves. It was a 9-seater, and I was forced into the middle seat with Mrs. K in the passenger seat. I was completely surrounded in the van. The middle-aged man sitting on my right turned to me and said, "Sorry that had to happen to you. You might think it's strange, but from now on, just close your eyes and face down. We won't be able to see anything, but you will. Once we say it's okay, you can open your eyes." Then my grandfather started the car and began to drive, extremely slowly. I don't think we were going anywhere faster than 20 kilometers per hour. Soon, Mrs. K muttered, "This is the worst bit," and began to chant what sounded like mantras. I heard the cooing again. Coo, coo, coo. My heart sank. I grabbed the amulet I'd received from Mrs. K and closed my eyes, looking down. For whatever reason, I kept my eyes ever so slightly open and looked outside. What I saw was that pure white one-piece dress. It was moving at the same speed as the car. Its head was outside the window, so I couldn't see it. But I could see its body crouch down, as if it were trying to look inside. I let out a quiet shout unconsciously. "Don't look!" someone said in unison. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and gripped the amulet so hard I thought it would break. Knock, knock, knock. Something was tapping on the glass. Everyone in the car made a noise. Oh no. Ugh. Though they couldn't see anything, and they couldn't hear its voice, they could still hear the noises it made. Mrs. K's mantras grew louder. Eventually, when I thought the voices and sounds had stopped, Mrs. K said, "Looks like we've passed through unscathed." Everyone else, who had stayed silent until now, said, "Oh, thank God," in unison. The car stopped on a wide country road, and I was told to get into my father's car. Mrs. K said, "Let me have a look at your amulet," and I realized I was still gripping it. It had turned completely black. Mrs. K said, "It should be okay now, but just in case, you should hold on to it for a while," and gave me a new amulet. After that, I returned home with my father. My motorbike was taken to a neighbor's house by my grandfather a few days later. Apparently, my father had known about Hasshakusama too, and in his childhood, he had seen one of his friends pass away after capturing its attention. The men in the van were supposedly all members of my grandfather's family, so to some extent, they were related to me too. They had been doing all of this in order to divert Hasshakusama's attention to them. Even then, all 7 men couldn't meet up immediately, which is why I had to spend one night locked in a room. Once I got home, I called my grandfather, thinking I'd be able to hear the full truth of that night, but he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Are you? My spine was struck by a sudden cold draft. It seems that Hasshakusama's victims are usually young people or children who haven't reached adulthood. When these people are in states of extreme fear, they will run off to people who sound like their close relatives. Over 10 years later, when I had almost forgotten about this episode, I heard an interesting story. The Jizo that was sealing off Hasshakusama was destroyed by someone, and I think it was the path that goes towards your house, so you'd better be careful, my now widowed grandmother told me one day. I can only imagine now that this is all some stupid rural superstition, and that I was part of some ritual, but I can't imagine what I'd do if I heard it again. Coo, coo, coo.